When I was growing up, I thought my mom was the absolute strongest person I had ever met. Watching some of the things that she went through in my lifetime and still had this amazing um, grace and kindness and love to show for other people. I couldn't think anything else but she must be Superwoman, right? And there's a part of me that actually still believes that. But as I've been going through my healing journey, I'm realizing there's so much more to that story. Welcome back to Soulful Wonderings, the space where we search for meaning in everyday life and honor the lessons that help us grow. I'm Heather and I'm your host. And before we get started, we would love it if you would subscribe to our podcast. You can also head over to our socials and follow us there, and all of that information will be in the show notes. So, my mom, I know I talk about her a lot, but when I really look back at my life, she was really one of my biggest influences. I was so close to her, and losing her actually sent me on a pretty deep and dark spiral. I relied on her. I talked to her every day, often multiple times a day. She was my person. Do you know what I mean? I think a lot of us have our person in our life, and she was mine. I told her just about everything. I mean, not everything. As you get older, you tend to keep things from your parents, right? I know I did keep a few things from them. But what was crazy was, I think in my mind, I thought I was protecting her. She seemed somewhat sheltered, maybe naive. I'm not sure if that's the right word. And she wasn't. And I should have known that. I mean, why didn't I know that? Maybe that was because all I ever really saw her do was work, or that's what it felt like. She was in many ways a homemaker, and when I was growing up, you saw homemakers on TV and in movies. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, these were still old school things, but you had, My Three Sons and Leave It to Beaver and all those shows. And the wife tended to be a homemaker. And look, it's not that they weren't smart. They were. In fact, I would say all of them had a brilliance to them, very, very intelligent women. And running a household and keeping track of kids and all the things that comes with that is not for the faint of heart. I know that. And then they were these kind of amazing, nurturing moms. I don't know, maybe it was because when you saw the kids kind of, what's the word, get into mischief. And the mom had this balance of being the sweet mom and the knowing. You know what I mean? It was the kids will be kids thing. Even sort of serious stuff just wasn't that serious. Maybe that's because it was TV. But still, it just wasn't that serious. And they always knew. The mom always knew. They knew what the kid was up to. They just did. But for some reason, I equated that to being a bit naive. And maybe, again, maybe it was because, TV life, even the serious stuff was never really that serious. So maybe that's why I equated it to that. I say my mom was a homemaker, and she was, but she worked too. We owned our own business for as long as I can remember, and she worked in those businesses. As we got older, we worked in those businesses. Everybody worked. But she was also, taking care of the house and taking care of us. And I think I saw what I'm going to call the homemaker side, because for many years she was home with us after school and such. I remember coming home after school, and she was there. So I guess that's, in a kid brain, that equaled that she was home all the time. And I know kid math can be stupid, but still. Now, of course, over the years, I saw strains in their marriage. I mean, no marriage is perfect, right? But as a kid, I think you often don't think much of it. I think I was one of those that just assumed they would work it out. They'd be fine and they would still be around. I mean, like I said, after all, we don't all get along 100% of the time, do we? Why would this be any different? When I got a little bit older, of course, I saw more, understood more. Um, I don't know that it was necessarily worse as I got older. I was just noticing it more. So, to be truthful, I'm not sure if it got worse or if I was just able to understand it. Truth be told, my dad could be a son of a bitch. He really could. He was a very hard man at times. He was never physically abusive, at least not that I saw. But he had this way of belittling her. Hell, he did it to all of us at some point or another. But mom never showed the cracks. You never saw the chink in the armor, I guess is how people put it. At least not to us. I found out later that, of course, she talked to her sisters and stuff at times. I think she may have actually confided some things in my sister as she got older, but not to me. I was the baby of the family, and I think even as I got older, that's just how people saw me. I was the baby. I'm not sure any of her sisters, especially. I don't think they could stand my dad. Like I really don't think they could stand him because obviously there were things they knew that we didn't. But again, we never really knew that. They did a good job of hiding things like that from us kids. But I can remember two different times in particular that I want to talk about that mom kind of was burying that pain and that worry, I guess. And these are ones that I really noticed. Let's say that. So I'm trying to figure out how to explain this where it makes sense. Mom never went to the doctor. Never. We didn't have insurance, which a lot of small business owners like that often, you don't have insurance. So you pay for everything out of pocket, and that can get really expensive. I mean, she would take us if we needed to go. Especially as kids, they always wanted you to have your vaccinations and, all the things, or you would just have, we would have colds or, we would get sick and she would take us. But she never went. And when I say never, I mean never. I don't know that I had ever seen her actually go to the doctor. And I remember one night we were in the middle of moving, and it was that night, I guess, we'd stopped for the night. Mom sat down and she had her shoes off or probably had her slippers on or something. So I could actually see her feet, you know what I mean? And y'all, her ankle was black and blue. And again, I was still kind of young, so I had never seen bruises that bad, So in my young teenage mind, I'm, trying to process what in the world would cause that. So, Mom, what is wrong with your ankle? Why is your ankle so bruised? And of course, she brushed it off, said, "Oh, I just stepped wrong coming out of the trailer." That's not stepping wrong. That was bad. And I asked her, Mom, why don't you go to the doctor? Go see to that. And it was like other times she would kind of make light of it and, "Oh, that's not necessary. I'll be fine." And again, as a kid, I kind of moved on because, Mom said it was okay. So I believed her. And I think I knew deep down something was wrong. My intuition was hitting even when I was a kid. I just really didn't understand it then. So it was kind of easy to dismiss, I guess. So that's what I did. Like I said, Mom said it was okay. So, okay. Now I know that her ankle was probably broken. At the very least, there were fractures, or a fracture, multiple fractures, whatever. Here's the thing though, I'm not sure I ever even saw her limping. Now, mind you, I've had a problem with my ankle for months. It's been going on for like 8 months now. And it's nothing nearly as bad as that. Okay, nothing nearly as bad. I've got some ligament and tendon, issues, challenges to deal with. And I've been limping around here in a walking boot and the whole nine, And mine wasn't nearly, I can't imagine anyway, that it's nearly as bad as what I saw in her ankle. So when you think about it, there's no telling how long it took her ankle to actually heal and to stop giving her pain, especially without any kind of medical care. But in all that time, I never saw her stop. She continued to get us moved. She continued to work. She continued to take care of the house and us. She never stopped. And when I looked back on it later in life, and I realized how severe it must have been, I was convinced in that moment that my mom was Superwoman. That was just all there was to it. Would you like to meet Superwoman? Here she is. The other time that I can remember was this pain that she had. She would always sleep. I think it was her left side. I may be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure she would always sleep on her left side. And I remember one time asking her, Mom, why don't you just roll over? Something had happened. Why didn't you just roll over, sleep on the other side? She said, well, I can't sleep on my right side. And of course why? And she says, well, because it hurts when I lay on that side. Okay. Of course, me being me, I'm all, why? And she says, I don't know. It just hurts. And this went on for years. Okay. I want you to understand this. This went on for years because I was probably 10, 12 years old when I was asking her that. Fast forward many years and she starts losing weight, like a lot of weight. And from what I remember, she was trying to lose weight, but this was excessive. Okay. This was too fast. So she finally goes to the doctor. Now I want you to understand, at this point, I was in college. So I was 20, I think, at this point. So I'm going to say a good 6 years, probably 8 years, she'd had that pain on her right side. Anyway, so the pain, as they start running tests and figuring all this out, there's a tumor that's in her kidney. Her kidney is now 3 times the size it's supposed to be because of the tumor. The tumor has grown out of the kidney into an artery, growing against the flow of blood, which is completely not normal. Normally, cancer and stuff follows the flow of blood. This was going the wrong direction, up through the artery. It got into her heart, had gone completely through one valve of the heart, and was moving into the second. Yeah. Imagine that. It caused pain. But it took her forever to go to the doctor. And of course, that was our first introduction to cancer in the family. It was quite a ride. That's not what today's episode is about. That's another conversation, and we will have it because, yeah, quite a ride. But the conversation for today is, why did she never go to the damn doctor? I have what I guess is a love-hate relationship with this whole Superwoman thing now. Was she tough as nails? Fuck yeah. But did she always have to be? No. Because there were other times, y'all. These are just the ones I chose today, okay? She always, and I do mean always, took care of everyone else, but not herself. And it's, especially looking back on it, she didn't have to. It was a choice she was making. But guess who else does that? I feel guilt for things like that. Like for when, I'm spending money going to the doctor. We're spending all this money to run all these tests and find out what's wrong with me. And I'm probably just fine. right? I do that all the time. It's guilt that I have, primarily for the money. Because guess what? Mom never wanted to spend that money. Hell, I feel guilty for little things. My husband does a lot around here, around the house, so that I can do things like podcasts and projects and, all the things that I'm trying to do. And I feel guilty that I'm not doing it, that I'm not the one taking care of him, 100% of the time, 24/7. Did I inherit this from her? Is it conditioning? Yeah, I feel like that's where we're going to land. The person I admired the most is probably where I was influenced the most, right? I mean, kind of fits. And what I equated to strength was most likely some kind of guilt for her putting others first all the time. She probably felt some kind of guilt. As I found out more about her relationship with my dad, I'm more and more certain that that guilt was there for her. He had, quote unquote, saved her from someone who was at least portrayed as this horrible person, or at the very least, just not someone who was good to her. Again, so many other stories, y'all. But so I feel like there was a certain amount of guilt with that, because my dad could be a full-on narcissist, right? So it makes sense that she felt like she owed him something, because he had saved her. And then she felt guilt for spending that money, or maybe not fulfilling her, wifely duties, her household duties. But here's the rub. She also really did have the heart of a caretaker. Do you know what I mean? I think she actually enjoyed doing for others. She liked to cook. She loved a nice and neat and clean house. I think she really loved taking care of us and having a relationship with us. Maybe she felt conditioned. Maybe she had been conditioned to do those things. She certainly came from that older generation where everyone worked. The females did the nurturing. Some would say that a female's job was to, be the caretaker in the home and be the nurturer. Things like that. There are some that will say that females that were literally built for this. I think there is validity to the arguments, I guess, that men and women are just created differently, and they have different instincts. I do believe that. I think there's a balance to that. You're doing this, I'm doing this, and then everything gets taken care of. I don't have an issue with that, I guess is what I'm saying. But I don't know if it's that or if it was some kind of conditioning she was coming from. Those are things I don't know. But I truly believe that there were both things going on with her, that she had this guilt, she had this feeling like she owed my dad something, but yet had this desire to nurture and to care for others. So maybe they kind of worked together. Maybe it was hard to separate. Maybe there was a lot there to get to if you wanted to really look at it and evaluate it and figure out the why of it. So no matter how we got there, it was something that I've been trying to heal on a fairly regular basis, right? In Theta, we try to get down to the bottom belief of why we're doing something. Like I said, it could be with Mom, there were multiple things going on. Where did they come from? Was it a trauma response? Was it conditioning? We could have brought it in with us from another life. Basically, there are many reasons that we do the things that we do, that we react the way that we react. I've noticed that I've had to basically heal things like this many different times. because it presents itself a little differently. You know, every time you heal one layer, another layer shows up, and it's probably a little bit different, but it has to be healed as well. So it's kind of it can be a continuous challenge to work on, because as you heal it, then you recognize something else. And then you work on healing that. And in some ways, I know that can probably, I guess, sound a little frustrating, and I guess it can be, but it's also interesting to see how there are so many intricacies in all of this, and how as you move forward, you start to go, oh, well, I healed this thing. That's really neat. And you see the healing in yourself as you move on to the next step. Um, these are things I wish I had known when my mom was still alive and when we were in our relationship. You know, knowing what I know now, I wish there were things I could have done to help her. But, you know, by the same token, they say that we all come here for a reason, and hopefully she fulfilled her reason, and there are things about that I don't know that I will understand, again, because I mean, I didn't live her life, so I don't know. But there are times when I wish I could have helped her in the way I'm able to help myself now. But with all of that said, what do we do? You know, how do we recognize and sort of separate all of this? What's conditioning? What's joy? You know, how do we recognize which is which? Maybe strength isn't what we thought it was. Maybe strength isn't pushing through pain, or never needing help, or always putting yourself last so everyone else can be okay. Maybe real strength is noticing the pattern and choosing something different. My mom went through a lot in her life. Maybe some of it was choices she made, but much of it wasn't. It was the choices, or the things that happened to other people in her life. So I still truly believe that she was one of the strongest people I've ever known. But now I see her strength with a little more tenderness. I see the love in it. I see the sacrifice in it, and also the cost of it. And if I'm honest, I see pieces of that same pattern living in me. You know, the part that feels guilty for resting, the part that feels selfish for receiving, the part that thinks being needed is the same thing as being worthy. But awareness gives us a choice. We can honor the people who shaped us without repeating every pattern they carried. We can love what was given to us and still choose some healthier things for ourselves. So maybe the real question isn't why did they live that way? Maybe the question is, now that I see it, how do I want to live? Now, if this stirred something in your heart, I don't want you to brush past it. I want you to sit with it. I want you to get curious. And I have a few gentle reflections that hopefully will help you begin. One is, what did being strong look like in the people who raised or influenced you? What did they push through or ignore or never ask for? Where in your life do you feel guilty for having needs? Needs like rest, help, attention, medical care, emotional support. And notice what feels like too much. Next, what parts of caring for others truly feel aligned with who you are, and what parts feel like obligation or pressure. See if you can feel the difference and where that comes up in your body when you think about that. Next, how would your life change if taking care of yourself counted as a strength, not a weakness? What would you do differently this week with that in mind? And lastly, what is one small way you can practice a new version of strength today? Something simple, something kind, something that includes you. This week, I invite you to get curious about the strength you learned and the strength you want to practice now. And if you're realizing that some of these patterns or conditioning run deeper than you want to untangle alone, you don't have to. This is the kind of work that I help people walk through every day, gently identifying what you've inherited, what you've learned, what you're ready to release, so that you can live in a way that actually feels like you. So if you feel called to work through your own patterns, beliefs, conditioning, any of those things, reach out. You can connect with me through the links that are in the show notes. I want to thank you for being here, for doing the work with me, and for having the courage to heal in ways the generations before you maybe never could. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself. You are allowed to be supported too.